Hello, hello, and welcome to PolyAmAreWe, the podcast which deals with polyamory and ethical non-monogamy from a male emotional perspective. In with us today, well, patching in from, where are you right now, Tom?
I'm in County Wicklow in Ireland.
In County Wicklow. So patching in, we have Tom. Give us a hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Close enough. So how are you going, Tom? How's everything?
Good, actually. I'm doing well. It's a typical rainy day here in Ireland.
Yeah, that's why I left. That's why I left back in 2016, and I haven't looked back since. I mean, I like sunshine. I need the sunshine in my life.
Well, it's, we get that too. It's, because it is Ireland, we get all the seasons in one day. It'll be sunny in 5 minutes.
Yeah, and then, you look forward to your 2 days of summer when it's exceptionally warm, and then the next day it'll be pissing rain again. The usual 30 years of it. Cannot complain. So, thanks for joining me on this podcast today, Tom. Tom was over visiting Madrid only a couple of weeks, a week ago. And we were hanging out. There was myself and my partner, my wife, Nash, Tom and his partner, Eddie. And we have an interesting connection going on because Eddie is one of my connections. I know her for, it must be nearly 2 years now that I'm in contact with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, close enough. But I had heard about Tom for all that time. I'd never met Tom. I just heard how wonderful he is until we met for the first time in December when we were back in Ireland for Christmas, and we got an invite to Tom's amazing Christmas party. It was really US-ified with all the fancy clothes and sitting at the piano, and it was just so special. So it was actually wonderful then to meet you, Tom, because I'd heard so much about you. But I think a lot of times
likewise, yeah.
For myself, when you hear about a partner of of a connection, we tend to conflate the other person in our mind's eye or give them, like, I tend to do that. If I hear about, like, Nash right now is seeing a guy, but in my mind's eye, initially I'd be thinking, oh, this guy must look like Thor with, ripped six-pack and a big Norse beard. And I think it's always beneficial to meet your Metamours if they're open to that at some point.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You're like, I've heard about couples that that have a sort of a policy where people have to meet them before they start relationships with them, before they start dating, and that there's there are people that really get their partners involved. Mm-hmm. That's not the way that Eddie and I work. She dates on her own and she makes her own connections, as do I. But we keep each other informed so that we're always aware. In fact, I think that's really important, so that she knows if I'm like, I let her know that if I'm on a dating app or if I'm texting somebody, mm-hmm. or meeting somebody for coffee. So even in those very, very early stages, I keep her informed. I think that's really nice. But you're right. Without meeting somebody, you do have in your mind all sorts of. I would share that feeling with you, like that I would have all sorts of imaginations going. Well, I think you always wonder, well, is there something that she's getting from that partner, that I could be providing? Because that's my fear, is that I could be providing something that she's not getting. I have no problem if there's. Because I know everybody's different and everybody, I believe, brings something unique to the table. So mm-hmm. like, I don't feel competitive on that way, but I might have feelings of fear of inadequacy or something. Like if there's something that I'm going, well, I could be doing that and I'm not, then it makes me nervous.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing.
I can relate to that.
Meeting people, you realize everyone is so unique that there's no question in my mind that, like, she'll have a unique connection with you per se, and somebody else. Everybody will have their own connection, and suddenly I don't feel like there's any fear anymore. I think that's really what I would.
Yeah, I know. I can completely agree on that one, because I spoke about it on a previous podcast, whereas within every other relationship dynamic I may have with anyone else, there's different facets of my personality that I can show off. Let's say I have an interest in cooking, but Nash doesn't, but I meet someone who's interested in cooking, then I can share that aspect of my personality with that person, whereas I can't with my nesting partner because they don't have that interest. So it's great for me anyway, from my experience, to be able to explore different aspects of my own personality and my own emotional depth by meeting new and interesting people. And then I love hearing stories or hearing about adventures they've had with other partners, or restaurants they've gone to, or trips they've taken. And it's one of those things that feeds in then, that if I hear of a good restaurant, or if I visit a good restaurant with a partner, then I know of that good restaurant to take subsequent partners to.
Yeah, I actually had an interesting experience yesterday. Interestingly enough, last night I was chatting with Eddie, my partner, but I'd met with a girl that comes over. I have a relationship with, a DS relationship with, and we played on earlier in the week. And it was super fun. And Adita was asking me about it. She was, I said, oh, by the way, I had it. She knew it was on my calendar. We have a shared calendar, so I put dates that I'm having on there, so she knows if I'm with somebody, so she can be more cautious. We can both be more cautious. She's not going to start calling me on the phone if I'm on a date.
Right? Yeah, it's another aspect of open communication, because you have that there, so she can just look at a glance and go, oh, well, Tom's busy here, so I won't be pestering him about picking up the milk. That can hold till tomorrow.
But yeah, I was chatting and I said, oh yeah, it's this really fun time. And she, oh yeah, I said, do you want to? I always ask her. I'm like, do you want to hear about it? Right? Because sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're in a place where you will. And she was like, oh yeah, tell me what you guys get up to. And I said, well, I did this thing, and I tried something new and it was really fun. And she said, oh my God, that sounds so much fun. And I said, I'd really like to do that with you. But I said, I don't know how you feel about that. If I've done something, for the first time with somebody, and then I come back and go, like, is that weird? I don't know if it's weird. I asked her, I was like, is it weird that I'm like, I want to do this with you now? And she was like, I love that. And I said, okay, that's awesome. I said, it's a lot of asking questions and interrogating the other person.
Absolutely.
At their comfort level.
I've had that myself, because even like you mentioned there, DS, so dominant, submissive. And like it was actually Eddie who gave me the term, I'm a submissive, what am I saying? A sensual dominant. And she was the one that first gave me that kind of idea in my head. And it totally resonated with me from the moment she said it. I was like, okay, well, that makes sense, But in that kind of dynamic, like, there's things with Nash and I that would never work. We could never have a DS kind of a dynamic going on in any way, shape, because it just wouldn't work. And this touches back on showing different sides of your personality with others, and then being able to bring certain things back home to try with other partners. So it's one of those things that
it's really interesting. Yeah, I think the idea of being poly has really showed me that the dynamic that evolves between two people, that relationship, is really a sort of a unique thing. The things that I enjoy doing with one person, I might not particularly like doing with another person. So it has to do with the relationship at hand. I have a very, very close relationship with Eddie, and it's been fantastic. But I think it is founded on that communication and that honesty and the lack of judgment. Because I remember the first time that I really started. We met during the pandemic, and there was all sorts of restrictions on social interactions. So even though we both told each other that we were poly, we didn't have any opportunity to do that.
I can relate. Myself and Nash opened up our relationship just before the pandemic hit, so we had all that time to educate ourselves and read books and look at. But we didn't have any opportunity to practice or to meet new people, except like chatting to people on dating apps.
Yeah. Well, I knew Eddie had a couple of ongoing relationships prior to the pandemic that she maintained, for a good period of time during the lockdowns. But as the restrictions and the sort of we called ourselves COVID-ogamous, because it was like we were sort of unwillingly monogamous during a lot of those times.
Forced monogamy.
And so it was really interesting. But yeah, so when I sort of first made the next connection outside of that relationship, um, it was very different than the kinds of connections that she had been making outside of outside of our relationship, because there was much more. I had a much more of an emotional, romantic connection with the girl that I started dating.
Okay.
And Eddie had a much more transactional relationship with the people that she was seeing. So it was a challenge for us that first time I came back from the state, and I was telling her all the sort of new relationship energy stuff that you read about, and she was really kind of freaked out about it, because it wasn't just I met, we hooked up, there you go, maybe we'll call you again. It was more like, oh, I'm really excited to go see her again and do this, and she was like, oh, so it was really interesting, because we had to navigate that and communicate with each other about it. And weirdly enough, that particular woman, we no longer have that relationship. She started dating somebody and decided that she needed to be exclusive with him, and so it was great. But we retained our friendship, but in the context of her sort of monogamous relationship, we've drifted apart. But Eddie has maintained her friendship, and they're actually quite close. Like, they text all the time, and I'm going, well, it's really kind of interesting.
That is very interesting. And what's really interesting is there's a whole fluidity, I feel, to this lifestyle. Whereas you could be intimate with a partner, you could be meeting up with someone for the craziest, kinkiest sex you could ever have. And then over time, you transition into just like-minded friends who are able to support each other through their own relationship struggles. And I have friends who come to me quite often. I got a message this morning of a friend of mine who's having issues with her husband, and it's quite a complicated affair. But it's great that she feels she can come to me because I have that insight from living this lifestyle.
Yeah, I think that it is really important, the fluidity of it, because things do change. Things are always changing, and there's periods of time where I might not be seeing anybody, or Eddie might not be seeing anybody, or we just don't want to, or whatever. I think you need to accept that you change, and I think it's really hard to demand change off. It's foolish to demand change off of anybody else.
Absolutely, yeah. You're just going to end up going in circles trying to change anyone to your way of thinking, because we're all unique, we're all special. Every relationship is unique and special in its right.
Yeah, so it's interesting, because some things, some people have drifted farther away in my life than than I would have wanted, and that there's always a sadness with that. But things come around, and I just kind of try and keep an open mind and try and be non-judgmental. I think I've always been that way, but I was married for many, many years, and that relationship ended in divorce, but not really for not from a relationship standpoint. There was other factors involved with the ending of that. But it was just after that I just said, I don't think that monogamy thing was a good choice for me. I did it, and it was successful in many ways, but ultimately just didn't work out.
So would you have felt you were geared towards open, more ethical non-monogamy, or towards polyamory before you got married, or was that a more recent was that a transition?
Looking back in retrospect, I wouldn't have had any names or terminology for that, right? So I didn't know that. But looking at my dating patterns, it was funny, because I had a girlfriend in college that we met my freshman year in university, and we dated. I went through college in 5 years opposed to 3 or 4, like most normal people, but did it all the way through college, and then for several years after college, right? So ultimately about an 8-year-long relationship, but it was fraught with all sorts of breakups and breaks and patterns involved, where we had broken up at some point. She was seeing somebody else, but then we were hooking up all the time. And there was a lot of things that I look back and say that was a poly relationship. Yeah. But we didn't have the tools to define it as such, or the acceptance to understand it. So there was there was a lot of complications in that relationship.
Well, society pressures as well, because it's only, as you know yourself, it's only within the last decade or so where this is becoming more a talked about topic, whereas before, I mean, people would have had like affairs and would have had those conversations, would be secret swingers, but would never even let their best friends know of what's going on.
Yeah, I think that was it. But so in retrospect, I looked at it and I from a sort of a moral and emotional perspective, I thought that was okay. Like I never had any problem with that relationship, and because I look back and I go, how did I manage to date a girl for 8 years? But at the same time, I could list a significant number of other relationships that I'd had in the middle of that 8 years for various reasons and ways, that because we had broken up or we were traveling or I was studying abroad or things like that. And yet there was a lot of overlap between those. So I look back and I think, I've kind of always been this way, but never really had it until after the divorce and started exploring the actual possibilities and other people who had done things like this before. I think that's the key. Learning from each other and from other people.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting, because I often say on this podcast, whereas like I have a vivid memory of asking my mother when I must have been only about 8 or 9 years old, and saying, why is it that there's only one person for one other person? And even at that young age, it didn't really sit well with me, this idea of, standard monogamy. Although at that age, I wouldn't have any idea of anything different. It was just an idea that there could be something different, and why can't people just be with it? And I was just told straight away, going, that's just how it is. I was like, okay, fair enough.
That's just how it
is. So you just accept it as you go on.
Well, it's hard to challenge those societal norms. And I think that's there's a lot of struggle, and I think we're at a point right now where it's starting to be generally understood amongst the people in our society, anyway, in the sort of Western European society, that there are these kinds of relationships, and that there are people who are okay with this, and it's not totally needs to be secret, but it is still a little bit secret. I remember having very, very early on in my own exploration, I met a guy who was really interesting. He was speaking at a conference, and it was a work-related conference. We struck up a conversation, and we went to go have a beer after the conference, and we were chatting. And he said, we were just chatting about our lives, and he said something about his girlfriends or something. I can't remember how he put it. And I said, did you say girlfriends? He said, oh yeah, well, there are three of us. We're I can't remember what they call it.
A throuple,
something like that. But it was him and two women. And they all had a sort of a singular relationship between the three of them.
Interesting.
And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, I had already started exploring non-monogamy, and I was going, okay, here's somebody I never would have suspected, that was living this life. And it was suddenly that opened up a whole level of conversation. And I was like, oh, I have questions for you. It was good. But it is. It's sometimes it's hard to find those people to ask those questions and have those conversations.
Yeah, that's interesting, because recently, I think I was telling you, I was at a comedy gig here in Madrid, and it was called Failing in Love. And so the comedian of very first instance says, okay, hands up who here is in love. So me being the confident me I am, I'm the first one to put my hand up. And then it all shit hit the fan, because I told them all about my relationship dynamic, all about different girlfriends. But I could feel it in the room that it was very polarizing, that a good half of the room I could feel wanted to know more. We're very keen on hearing how this dynamic can function. And the other half were very closed off, very kind of, and it was just a feeling amongst a group. And I suppose like it can be still a very polarizing kind of thing. And we were talking about not keeping secrets, but I mean, all my friends, all of my family would know my lifestyle, except for my mother, who's now in her 60s, and it would just worry, confuse, and upset her. So there's no reason to let people completely know everything if it's not needed. Like if it ever came out, I'd be open and honest about it, going, yeah, this is my life, this is how I live my life. But when it has a potential to potentially upset someone, then it's better to hold these things.
Yeah. I think, I mean, again, I feel like I don't necessarily hold them in. I guess maybe I do. I try not to broadcast it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the main thing. I mean, there are people out there. And I think
He says really while recording a podcast, he doesn't want it broadcast.
The irony, yeah. But no, I think it's important that there are people out and prominent and speaking, spreading spreading the awareness
Mm-hmm.
of it. This is what your podcast is kind of doing as well. So I'm participating in that. On a personal level, though, like I can't think if people in my work know or not. I don't know. Actually, I can't think because I don't make a big deal out of it. I
Yeah.
remember who I've told or who I don't. It's not a secret.
But then it's very personal as well. I mean, all these things can be very personal, where it's just like, well, that's how I live my life, but how I live my life in any aspect, even in monogamous, is no business of anyone else unless it's affecting someone else or it's, illegal in some way. But otherwise, I mean, each to their own.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Like it is funny though, because I have a primary partner and I'm not, the sort of a relationship anarchist or whatever. However they define it, where people are really solo, poly, or doing their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
You have a partner. I easily fit into the very typical cishet stereotype. I'm a male with a girlfriend, and I can say stuff. Oh, my girlfriend this, my girlfriend that, or my partner this, my partner that. I'm not necessarily excluding my other relationships, but I do have a primary partner, so it's easy for me.
How do you find, like, how many, if I can ask a personal question, how many separate partners do you have at the moment, like with Eddie and then additional?
There are probably Eddie being my primary partner, and there are probably three women that I have relationships with, varying degrees of intimacy and interactions. So
this leads to my next question. How do you manage your time? Because even I find where I have my primary partner, Nash, and then there'll be two others, one who I'm seeing and another who I'm seeing on a more kind of exclusive note. But even at that, I find myself a bit strained when it comes to work commitments and it comes to social commitments and just looking after myself. And then
yeah,
I mean,
that's why I hesitated when I was trying to, add up the numbers, because what I would say is I have, Eddie, my primary partner, and I have another woman who I have who's a submissive. I have two other women that I have a submissive dominant relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And one of which it's been going on for well over a year. I probably see her every 2 weeks or so.
Mm-hmm.
Either at her house or my house or wherever. And I've recently sort of brought in a woman because I was looking for somebody that could fill the space, but I probably only once every month or once every month and a half.
Okay.
So it's very casual. And the fourth woman, we're friends, social friends. She has, a primary partner and a couple of other partners. And we have been together a few times. There's nothing regular and there's nothing consistent. So I count her on that level, but I'd say we interact socially more often than we interact internally.
Mm-hmm. And would there be for yourself any sort of an emotional connection with any of your additional partners? You touched on it earlier on about the emotional depth you would have with your primary partner, but with the secondary partners, would there be that any form of emotional, a romantic connection more so? Because there's always going to be emotional, whether it's friends or
friends. Yeah, there's always emotional, but I think that romantic side of it is is probably the thing that I reserve for my primary partner, and that's the I suppose the unexpected, the serendipitous, the unplanned moments, and and those that's what I would sort of say. That's kind of my relationship with Eddie. The
Mm-hmm.
relationship I have with everybody else is much more structured.
Mm-hmm.
We arrange dates and times and things like that. We don't tend to have sort of the spontaneous, unplanned types of interactions. So that's I suppose it has to do with spontaneity and serendipity and things like that. That's what I would say, because obviously I do care about them all,
Mm-hmm.
but I wouldn't necessarily have the same involvement in their lives and the rest of the fullness of their existence. I'm exposed to a very small portion of their lives, and them a smaller portion of my own life. So I think the opportunity for that a deeper connection is more limited.
That is very interesting. All right. Yeah, because I often would say with some of my connections where it is on a very friendship kind of a feeling in terms of the emotional attachment. Like if they needed me, I would be there for them. But I'm not ever going to plan to spend Christmas with them or, run away in a whirlwind trip or, that type of a feeling. Whereas with a lot of my connections, we could just as easily sit around, watch a movie and discuss politics or anything on the sun as we could, getting down to some freaky stuff. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it would just be the very same the next day on our feelings towards each other, whether the night before was, tying each other up or just chilling out, eating popcorn, watching a movie.
yeah. No, it's true. Although I do tend to reserve the chilling out, watching popcorn and eating movie, really primarily with my primary partner. I'd say that tends to
Mm,
be the way it's shaken out in my world.
interesting.
Just that. Now that said, like they're all going to be at my my summer barbecue. So like we that there obviously there's not going to be any, I mean, shenanigans there other than normal
Hmm.
social, because I have all my vanilla friends and work people and things like that
It's like
there.
mixing oil and water.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't, it doesn't bother me,
Hmm.
like that they'll be there. My family would be, my sister, my daughters
Yeah.
will be there. So it's not a problem. Like it would be interesting to me, if somebody who doesn't know them, says, "Well, how do you know Tom?" It'll be interesting to hear how they explain it, but like I'm
Yeah.
not particularly
I
defensive.
think that's one of those unwritten rules, though, as well. As same at your Christmas party where I was at, where you can feel the energy from like-minded people, I think, whereas we all gravitated to one side of the room, whereas a lot of your work colleagues or family would gravitate to another side of the room. And we just had this feeling for each other. And I don't know whether it's the style of dress or just the personality types, but we were drawn to each other and we just sat around talking. But not once did it ever come up in conversation about,
Yeah,
the lifestyle, because unless it's, a point where you're actually all agreed that you're going to be
yeah.
talking about this, it's sort of one of those topics where, well, if you don't need to know, you don't need to know. And let's not make this weird.
Yeah, no, I think it's fine, because I said, well, we're going off to Spain for the weekend, and oh, what are you doing there? I said, oh, we're going to visit some friends of Eddie's. Like,
Hmm.
I didn't have to explain how you guys are friends, or what the nature of your friendship is. I was just like, oh yeah, we're going to go hang out with some of Eddie's friends, and and that's the same. Like it's not any trouble. Like to me, if somebody says, "Well, how do you know this woman?" I'll just say, "Oh yeah, we're friends from around the place."
Yeah, well, it comes back to the main thing. Like, the main mantra I go by is just to treat people like people and not to treat people like objects. In any, in anything we do.
Yeah, it does get tricky. I mean, if, in Ireland especially, I mean, people are
Uh-huh.
always very interested in each other's business. So it'll be very interesting
But
to
then they're
see.
equally just as shocked when they find out about your business because of that conservative thread that runs through everything. Not so much now, but I don't know. Were you in Ireland in the early 2000s, late 90s?
Not permanently, no, but like I said, I was married to an Irish woman, so we were here regularly
Hmm.
for holidays, from about 1998 onward. So yeah. So I mean, I do remember trying to buy condoms in about 2003, and that was an experience definitely I was not unprepared for.
Hidden in the back of the pharmacy under a
Oh yeah,
veil or
no,
something.
I got
Yeah.
sent from one pharmacy to another. I had to go to an entirely different town. Actually, they said, "Oh yeah, you wouldn't find those here. No, you'll have to go." But obviously, the way the woman mentioned the neighboring town was with sort of some disdain, as if all the sinners lived there or something. Um, I was amazed, and I said, "Okay, I'll go there." She goes, "They'll be in the family planning section." Okay.
It is crazy. I mean, and just how much Ireland itself has changed in the last 20 years. And that's why I was asking you, because I was quite young then in 2003. I would be in, what, I'm 85, so 10, about 13 or 14 years old, and even since that time, I've seen massive changes in just the mentalities. Even any time I go back, there's a new club I hear of, or some other thing, or even just to see a pride flag flying,
Yeah.
where it wouldn't have been seen back in the 90s. It wouldn't even be talked about.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah. But at the same time, I think it's telling of the tolerance of the Irish society that that we were one of the first to legalize gay marriage.
Hmm.
We were, um, there is still a bit of caveman level on the on the gender imbalance around. I think having just gone through a divorce,
Hmm.
I felt very. I felt a lot of prejudice or bias towards the mothers in that situation,
Okay.
and it was challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine, because generally, like, I come from a family. My parents divorced when I was 13 or 14 as well, and it's interesting when I look back on it now, of all the things that would have gone, had to go through, and the divorce had only been legalized at that point, because it was illegal up until, I think it was 2001. I'll have to check my facts on that,
Yeah,
but just how different the country is now as opposed to it was then. Just outstands me, and it can only
yeah,
get bigger and better and more. I think the more we get to talk about that there are different ways of doing things, that you don't have to squeeze yourself inside of a box just because somebody says that's the right thing to do. It may not be the right thing to do for you.
yeah, totally. I mean, it does. It takes time for the legal structures to catch up with the kind of accepted societal practices.
Hmm.
And I think that what was it, the Eighth Amendment, that put a lot of that legal framework in place for some of the non-traditional relationships.
Hmm.
That's really important. Especially as I'm starting to get older and thinking, oh God, like I got in an accident and broke my back a couple weeks ago, not a couple years ago, sorry, weeks ago, years ago, got hit by a car. And suddenly that brought up the question of, does Eddie get to visit me in the hospital? Right.
Uh-huh.
Because we're not married, and she doesn't have an official relationship with me. And I thought, that's suddenly that changes things a little bit when you go, well, she's my primary partner. She's the person that I want to be able to come in and, visit me in the hospital. Right.
Hmm.
So it's kind of interesting on that. So I think the law does catch up with us eventually, and you know, so hopefully it won't be an impediment. But I think Ireland has been very, very positive on that front.
Hmm. Yeah, I have to agree. Very, very open minded when it comes to the whole liberal stance, and then the moving forward as society as a whole has been. It's actually really nice to see, especially now that I don't live there, that I can look back and go, okay, well, I mean, I often feel that when I left Ireland, I was very uncomfortable living there, but and then I've often said that maybe Ireland is ready for me to come back, kind of a way. I know it sounds very egotistical.
You can go visit me anytime, Carl. I'm happy to have you.
No, as I said, like, I don't see myself living there in Dublin. Maybe some other area in Ireland down the line, but right now it's nice to be somewhere where I feel Madrid is a lot more kind of open in terms of the mentalities. I mean, it is getting more open in Ireland, but I feel here is a little bit more liberal.
Yeah. See, now that's interesting because there's another strongly Catholic company with country with a history of being very, religious and restrictive.
Well, actually, interestingly though, as well, anyone I've met on a dating app here on the poly dating apps, there's never been a local person. They're all either from outside or the only reason they'd be from Spain and on the app is if they've traveled or spent multiple years abroad and then have come back and are like, okay, well, I'm open to this now. But generally, I don't meet anyone from Madrid, Spain. It's people from Poland, or it's people from England, or people from the US. And I find that's very interesting in itself.
That is actually really interesting. I wonder if there's a whole world we're not seeing, Karl.
Perhaps. Let's lift the veil on this.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you would like to offer a bit of insight on, or anything you'd like to add before we wrap up this episode of PolyAmAreWe?
PolyAmAreWe. The only thing we haven't touched on, I think it would be it's interesting. I have two daughters, and I think it's really interesting in terms of how they understand my lifestyle, and I think that's important somehow to share, because I think a lot of people, especially people that are coming into this who may have kids, they may be worried that it could get confusing for them.
Mm-hmm. I was going to mention that earlier on, actually, when we were talking about time, and I was about to mention, oh, you've two daughters, but it's not my place to mention. I was like, I'll just wait and see if he brings it up.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important. I mean, like I didn't come out to them per se, but they did become aware of it through the divorce, which was not my intention ever to necessarily bring it up to them, but it happened, and it prompted a whole bunch of conversations, which I feel were really net positive, about consent and about relationships. And as a result of my openness with them and my honesty with them about my relationships and what was going on, they have been very open and very communicative with me, and so we have a very I'm very happy with the communications that I guess the communication pathways that have been opened up. And again, so that's, to me, the whole idea of being open to the poly connections requires such communication skills or such openness to being honest and communicating with people.
Absolutely, yeah.
It benefited that relationship as well.
Yeah.
And I've been really happy with that. My daughters are open with me about their relationships, and I don't really care. I actually couldn't tell you if my daughters are straight or gay or bi or whatever, because they're 20 and 22 now, years old, and they they have their relationships, and I just don't. My point is never to judge them. I don't care if they're dating whatever gender they're dating or expressing themselves. It's not really relevant to me.
I suppose respecting their individuality as you respect theirs, it's a two-way path. Like, as I've said, I mean, myself and Nash, our communication is better than it's ever been these last few years since we've opened up our relationship. And even the skills I've learned through that, I can bring into other relationships, whether it be with a partner or not, just across the board, that I find it's easier to find my words because I can really think about what I need or what I want from any particular conversation.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it comes back to the communication again, and not necessarily reacting or separating out your own knee-jerk emotional reactions. I think with time and questioning. If I have an instant reaction to something that somebody's telling me, I immediately sort of question that reaction in myself and go, where is that coming from? And that allows me to ask a question and go, to validate that, right? Am I right for being like freaked out, upset, sad, angry, whatever emotion it is that I'm feeling as a result of that? I can kind of go dig into that and be like, why is that upsetting to me? And then, do I need to be upset, or is that irrational?
And what about, let's say, jealousy? Would you feel jealous yourself, or you mentioned, you touched on earlier on the
There's always, I think there's always sort of again, like it's that instant reaction. If I see, I suppose if I'm hearing it from Eddie directly, I always have a little bit of the jealousy thing. I'm not sure I understand jealousy completely. Like I think it's probably a complex emotion that combines a lot of like FOMO and fear of loss, and all these things, fear of change, stuff like that. So like suddenly if she's got a new connection, I'm going to be going, well, does that mean I'm going to get less time with her? Does that mean I'm going to get less energy? Does it mean I think it's always an instant, like, how does this affect me? Does this mean she's going to desire me less? Right. Like, maybe he's really good at something that I enjoy doing and she doesn't want me to do anymore. Like, I don't know. Like, so there's instant amount of sort of fear of loss, fear of change. And I've learned now that usually that fear is irrational, that it doesn't, like, just because somebody else is doing stuff, with her that I might also enjoy doing, doesn't mean she doesn't enjoy doing it with me. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, so what? Like, if she wants to go play tennis with him and he's better at tennis than I am, does it mean that she wants to play tennis, doesn't want to play tennis
with him?
No.
Yeah.
She still enjoys playing tennis with me, and I still enjoy playing tennis with her. And her tennis with him doesn't matter at all, even if he's really fucking awesome at it. Right. And I go, okay, that's actually good. And maybe she comes back and she's better at it.
I could teach you a thing or two. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've learned.
Work on that backswing.
It's faster every time.
Yeah.
Right. So the more we do this, the more we do that, that it's now just a mild twinge of that sort of fear, or potentially you could describe it as jealousy.
I can relate to that one. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? That has never actually borne out to be a thing. So it almost immediately vanishes.
I think more so for me, it's more of an envy as well. If I hear like Nasha's gone off and once again to the restaurant and she's telling me about this beautiful, most gorgeous steak she's eaten, I'm like, I'm envious of the steak. I'm not jealous of her relationship with another person. I'm envious that I didn't get to eat that beautiful steak. I think throughout my own learnings, I've been able to sort of flip the script on it, where instead of feeling those feelings, like they will come in, these feelings of inadequacy and jealousy, but ultimately to have that feeling of I'm happy that my partner is having a good time with another person, and I'm feeling genuine happiness for their happiness, because why myself and Nash do this, or one of the things is I want nothing for her but her. As long as she's safe and happy, that's all that matters to me, because she's an individual and she's open to living her own life, and I get to share that life with her, but she also gets to share parts of that life with others interesting people. So it's a big fulfilling full circle from my point of view.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel a lot of that too. So with some of Eddie's partners, it's been like, I really am hoping that she has a good time if she goes out on a date. Sometimes, especially if she's meeting somebody new, I genuinely hope that she goes out and has a great time and she doesn't come back and go, oh yeah, that was a waste of time. It was like, whatever, it didn't connection or whatever.
Which can happen anyway. I think we all have our stories of that happening.
Oh yeah, it totally does. But like, if she goes out, I want her to have a good time. And I definitely enjoy hearing that she did. And, that's fantastic. And, sometimes it does. Sometimes she does bring it, quite often she'll bring more back into my relationship with her than she left with. So I've only ever experienced positive impacts from that.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I can totally relate to that. We're singing from the same hymn sheet on that one. Okay, so unless there's anything else you would like to add?
No, I'm happy. It's really been fun chatting to you.
It's always fun chatting to you. You're an awesome guy, Tom. What was the message I sent you today? I spent a little while constructing it because I wanted it to sound perfect. Thanks for coming to visit me in Spain. You're two of the most wonderful individuals I've met who have chosen to spend a significant amount of time together.
That was a really nice thing to say, and I really appreciated that. Yeah,
absolute pleasure. Man.
Very fun hanging out with you.
Yeah,
and Nash.
It was epic.
And like you said, it's great to just have people that are singing the same hymn sheet. So yeah.
Even Nash said it. Like, Nash wouldn't be as open as I am generally, or even as adventurous. But she was like, it was so refreshing to hang out with Tom and Eddie because I didn't have to explain things.
Yeah.
And you just get it. And that is the beautiful thing. We don't even have to talk about, I don't think we even spoke much about relationships at all. We were just having a laugh and eating some wonderful food.
But it just means that the conversations and the stories that you have, you don't have to.
It's not 100% your identity.
About, this is something I need to be cautious because this person's, totally square, and it'll freak them out if they know that, like, we're dating other people. Like, you don't have to think about that or sense of that, So I think that's nice. It's refreshing.
Tom, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. And if you would like to be a guest on PolyAmAreWe, simply drop us an email to polyamarewepodcast@gmail.com. Send us a message on TikTok, on Instagram, on where else are we? Facebook, all of them. You just put in Google PolyAmAreWe. I'm sure you'll find us. And I'll always write back. In the meantime, enjoy the journey and stay safe. Love you lots.